She thought he was just another drifter cowboy, stopping by for a meal and a place to rest. What she did not know was that he owned half the state, and that he had not let himself love anyone for years. The diner had been Clara's world for as long as she could remember. Every morning she brewed coffee, served breakfast, and listened to the chatter of locals. It was steady work, though quiet. She often felt the weight of routine pressing against her. The town was small, and life rarely changed. That night, when the cowboy walked in, she thought little of it. Men like him came and went. Dusty boots, sunburned skin, hats pulled low. Most stayed for coffee, sometimes a slice of pie. Then they moved on, but there was something in his eyes when he sat down at the far end of the counter, something she had not seen in a long time, a silence that seemed heavier than words. He introduced himself as Jack. His voice was low, almost careful, like every word was weighed before spoken. Clara poured him coffee, noticed the way his hands curled around the cup as if searching for warmth. He ate slowly, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the walls of the diner. He looked like a man who carried miles inside him. Clara had seen men like that before, but there was something different in the way he lingered. He asked for nothing more than a refill, thanked her politely, and remained quiet. Still, there was a presence about him, as though he was more than he seemed. Clara shrugged the thought aside. He was just a drifter, she told herself. When closing time came, Clara stepped out with her keys, expecting the lot to be empty. But Jack was still there, leaning against the wooden rail. The night air was cool. Crickets sang in the fields beyond. He tipped his hat politely, asked if she felt safe walking home alone. Clara laughed softly. She lived 2 blocks away. Still, his gesture touched her. Few ever asked. They walked together through quiet streets, their boots crunching against gravel. He spoke little, but she found herself curious. Most men in town had stories they repeated until the words lost meaning. Jack, however, left silence in his wake, a silence that made her want to ask more. Later that night, Clara sat at her kitchen table, bills stacked high. The diner paid little, and her savings never seemed to grow. Rent, utilities, and her younger brother's school fees left her with barely enough. She leaned back, rubbing her temples, thinking of her late parents. Responsibility had come too soon for her. She thought of the cowboy's eyes. They carried the same kind of weight she felt, of someone who had seen too much, carried too much. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. He was just passing through. He would be gone by morning. But Jack did not leave. The next morning, when Clara opened the diner, she found him already there, seated at the counter. He greeted her with a nod, ordered eggs and toast. His voice was calm, steady, but there was a hint of warmth she had not noticed before. She brought his plate, wondering why he had stayed. Men like him never lingered, yet here he was, sipping his coffee as though the diner was his home. She asked if he was heading somewhere, and he only said, "Not yet." Clara studied him. A drifter without a destination was rare. Days turned into a week, and Jack became a quiet fixture in town. He helped without being asked. When a boy's bicycle chain snapped, Jack knelt down, fixed it with ease, and sent the child riding off with a grin. Clara watched from the window, her curiosity deepening. People began to ask who he was. Some guessed he was chasing work. Others said he was hiding from something. Clara wondered the same. He dressed simply, spoke plainly, and never boasted. Yet his manners carried refinement, like someone raised with respect. When she asked why he stayed, he only said the town was quiet, and he liked that. One evening, Clara found herself walking with him past the fields outside town. The air was sweet with the scent of hay, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. Jack spoke of horses, of wide open land, of sunsets that stretched for miles. Clara listened, realizing he spoke with detail only someone who lived it could know. He described ranches, rivers, and cattle drives as if they belonged to him. She laughed, saying he sounded like a man who owned the world. He smiled faintly, but said nothing. Clara thought it was just talk, the way cowboys spun stories. She had no idea how close she was to the truth. The first hint came when a stranger in a suit arrived. He entered the diner with purpose, scanning the room until he spotted Jack. They spoke quietly, but Clara caught glimpses. Documents were placed on the counter, maps, figures, numbers. Jack signed quickly, his expression firm. The man left as swiftly as he came. Clara asked what it was about. Jack only said it was business, nothing for her to worry about. but she could not forget the look of respect in the suited man's eyes, the kind reserved for someone powerful. Jack was no ordinary drifter. That night, Clara asked him directly, "Who are you really, Jack?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said he was just a man who had been alone too long. He told her how he had lost his wife years ago, how the emptiness had driven him to wander. He had land, more than he needed, but none of it mattered without someone to share it with. Clara listened, her heart softening. She saw the truth in his eyes. He was not hiding poverty, but grief. She realized that behind the quiet cowboy was a man who had built walls so high, he had forgotten how to climb out of them. It was only later that Clara discovered the truth. Jack Rowe was not just a cowboy. He was one of the largest landowners in the state. Half the cattle seen from trains or highways grazed on his pastures. His name was whispered in business circles, his decisions shaping markets. Yet in town, he had worn plain boots, eaten at the diner, and sat quietly as though he owned nothing at all. Clara felt stunned. The man she thought was a drifter carried more than wealth. He carried influence, power, and responsibility. And yet, beneath it all, he was still the man who fixed bicycles and walked her home at night. Clara felt betrayed, not because he was wealthy, but because he had hidden it. She asked why he had not told her. Jack lowered his gaze, admitted he was tired of people who only saw his money. He had wanted someone to see him, just him. Clara understood, but the distance between them grew. She wondered if she could trust a man who lived in two worlds. The silence stretched between them, painful and unresolved. Days passed in strained quiet. A storm swept across the land, thunder shaking the ground. Clara stood at the diner window and saw Jack riding through the rain, his figure steady against the wild weather. He looked like a man who belonged to the storm itself, carrying burdens larger than any one town could hold. Her heart ached. She realized she missed him, not as a landowner, but as the quiet cowboy who had sat at her counter and made her days less lonely. That night, Jack came back to the diner. His hat dripped with rain, his coat heavy with water. He looked at her, eyes steady. "I should have told you sooner," he said softly, "but I needed you to know me before you knew the rest." Clara saw the truth in him, the longing, the loneliness. She stepped forward, handing him a towel, her anger softening. He was flawed, but he was human, and beneath the titles and the land, he was still the man who had chosen her company over silence. They sat together, words coming slowly, carefully. Jack told her he had not loved anyone since his wife. That fear had kept him from opening his heart. Clara listened, realizing she too had built walls, afraid of dreaming beyond survival. In that booth, with rain tapping against the glass, two lives that had wandered in loneliness found a place of stillness. Neither promised forever, but both admitted they wanted tomorrow. And sometimes, that was enough. In the days that followed, Jack invited Clara to see his ranch. They rode together across endless fields, cattle grazing, rivers shining under the sun. Clara felt the weight of the land, the vastness of his world. Yet what mattered most was the way he looked at her, no longer as a stranger, but as someone who had finally broken through his solitude. Clara knew life would not be simple, but she also knew love was never about simplicity. It was about choosing each other, again and again, despite the weight of the past. And as the sun rose over the horizon, Clara realized that sometimes the man you thought was just a drifter could carry not only half the state, but also the missing half of your heart.